The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings 2021 NFL Draft. Top 10 research, because as many viewers of the Pat Mayo Experience know, that I don't start paying attention to college football players until like a week before the draft. This year I've decided, hey, maybe I should know something about these guys. So I'm going to invite on a slew of different guests and analysts who know about these things, to tell me, to inform me, and in turn inform you about what is going to happen at the top of the NFL Draft. You enjoy this episode, you smash the like. You don't enjoy it, you smash the like anyway, okay? In the comment section, you give me your top 5, what you think that the NFL Draft is going to be. We're in February. It's no harm in being wrong about this, but in the draft order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, who do you think that the top 5 picks are going to be in the NFL Draft in 2021? Also, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Leave a 5-star review up there. That'd be very nice. It takes like 3 seconds. Even if you just want to leave a rating, you scroll to the bottom of your iPhone, hit 5 stars, and boom, you're on your way. Maybe less than 3 seconds. I don't know. I've done it so long ago, and you only need to do it once, so that's the way that we're going with it. Joining me on the line right now from FTNFantasy.com, and if you go over to FTN Fantasy, FTN Bets, or FTNDaily.com, always use the code MAYO to get yourself a discount on everything, but providing the free content, also the host of the Fade the Chalk podcast on the FTN network. It's Derek Brown. What's up, man?
What's going on, Pat? Thanks for having me. It's been a minute since the DFS street, since we've talked. So excited to hop on the mic and be able to draft or at least talk about some of these draft prospects.
Well, let's start at the top then, because it seems like every team, it's funny, like when we thought about it earlier, it's like, oh, well, if Miami keeps their pick, they're probably not going to take a quarterback, but it seems like there's like 20 quarterbacks in play to somehow go inside the top 10. Like you only read about quarterbacks. So I guess we'll start at the top. There's no chance Trevor Lawrence doesn't go number 1, right?
No, I can't see him getting past the Jaguars. I mean, I wrote up a piece for FTN Bets today talking about NFL draft props. And, I mean, the way I started it was Trevor Lawrence. Did you think there was going to be another name here for the favorite? So I don't think he gets past Jacksonville.
What do you make of him as an NFL prospect, though? Like, what do you think his chances of being the best quarterback in this draft class are?
So I like him as a prospect. I think obviously I don't know if he is necessarily, because the moniker gets tossed out there constantly about him being a generational guy, the best to come out since Andrew Luck. I think he's extremely, extremely good. I don't think that he's 100% lock set going to be the best quarterback out of this draft class. Percentage wise, I mean, is he 70% possibly going to walk out as that? Sure. I mean, all the things that you're looking for as a NFL-ready prospect, the ability to go through progressions, step up in the pocket. I think that some of the questions that he answered in 2020 was fantastic, because last year, walking into last year's draft, we had Joe Burrow and coming off a historic season, and what could he do with, if he didn't have all of these massive pieces like some of these guys we're going to get to later at the receiver position around him. Trevor Lawrence answered those questions in 2020 without having T. Higgins, no Justin Ross, and dealing with a lesser, not a terrible, but a lesser supporting cast around him. So I definitely think that he is definitely NFL ready, and you can't peg him outside the top 2 as far as like just in this class and overall prospects.
Well, on DraftKings Sportsbook right now, Trevor Lawrence to go number 1 overall is minus 10,000. So you bet $10,000, you win 100 if he ends up going number 1. Seems pretty unbettable to me. So we'll just pencil him in at number 1. Number 2, I guess, is where it starts to get interesting. Is there a chance the Jets don't take a quarterback at number 2?
The only way they don't take a quarterback at number 2 is if they trade down. I really think they're probably going to go quarterback. I mean, considering especially with the new head coach there, and he's going to want to tie probably his tenure as a head coach to his guy. I think they go ahead and select a quarterback. I mean, I really don't see, especially if some of the rumors are true of them getting possibly a 2nd-round pick back for Sam Darnold, then I think that, yeah, they probably go with quarterback there.
So if they do, okay, so I guess the way that it plays out is they could trade down, keep Darnold. The best reason to get rid of Darnold at this point is A, he's not any good, so that's a problem. But the Jets don't seem to know that. They might just continue to roll with him. But even if you roll someone into who's a similar prospect to Darnold, whether it's like Zach Wilson or Justin Fields in this spot, at least you reset the rookie contract clock that you don't need to sign him to this larger extension, which you probably have to. I mean, with Darnold right now, you would, opt into his year 5. You probably wouldn't give him an extension, because if you gave him an extension, it would probably be too much money. Or you sign him to this really short deal where if he ends up being really good, then you have to sign him to this like mega deal, and you probably don't want to lock yourselves into that. So I think it makes sense probably to move on. They may not choose to go down that route. Maybe let him run out his rookie contract and assess to see what's going on at quarterback next year, and then build up the talent around him. Those are all options on the board for the Jets right now. But let's say they're picking there and they're picking a quarterback. Which way do you think they go? And whether it be Fields, whether it be Wilson, as the two most likely candidates right now, Wilson being the betting favorite to go number 2 overall to the Jets at the moment, are these guys substantially better than how Darnold was as a prospect?
I was a little bit lower on Darnold coming out of USC.
Smart.
Than many, considering there was just a few questions I had about his game, some of his accuracy and ability to push the ball outside the numbers, as well as what he did versus pressure. So I had a few questions coming out. I think that Justin Fields is probably where I'd be laying my money if I'm going to bet who's going to be the second quarterback taken or the second overall pick. I personally like him as a prospect, at least in the early going right now, and all the prospect work that I've done so far. Justin Fields is my quarterback too. I think that there's just Zach Wilson's getting a lot of love, and I'm not saying that he's a bad prospect. He is definitely not. But for all of the pluses and the great things about Zach Wilson, the downside's not discussed as much as some of these other prospects.
What is the downside with Wilson? Like, what's his floor? Like, would he just be a colossal bust if things just don't break the right way?
So I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a bust at the next level. I think that a team taking him inside the top 5, which is pretty much where he's being rumored to go. Like, I don't know if he makes it outside the top 3. If he does, he could be one of the guys that precipitously fall in the draft. Although I do still put the money on him being inside that top 3. The floor is, I think that he's a guy that could flash in the NFL. I think the ceiling's extremely high, but my mentions got torn apart the other day out on Twitter because I used his name and Mitchell Trubisky on the podcast in the same sentence. And that, of course, strikes the ire of people, and they don't like that name. And they don't like that name, especially when they're tied to Zach Wilson. So I think that that's the floor, is like him being possibly this guy that a team is spending a top 3 pick on, tied to him for the next 3 to 4 seasons, if not maybe 5 if they pick up a 5th-year option. And at the end of that contract, they could be saying, okay, it's time to go get another quarterback.
Yeah, that's never a situation you want to be in, where you just went through this entire process and then you just reset the clock 4 years down the road and have to do it all over again. So if it's not a quarterback for the Jets at number 2, I guess, and it's funny because in terms of the betting board, Trey Lance is actually 10-1 to be the second overall pick. Does he have an outside shot of going to the Jets?
I think that he's got a shot. I think that he's definitely got a shot going to the Jets, or even possibly another team if they want to trade up, because there are some other teams that are lurking around that top 10 that could want to trade up for a quarterback, especially we've seen some of them be aggressive in the past. Like, I think the 49ers could definitely trade up for a quarterback, and depending on what their thoughts are for Lance, I won't be surprised, one, if we see a ton of quarterbacks go inside this top 5, and if Lance is possibly that second guy to go off the board, especially if the Jets could trade down and get somebody like Fields still inside the top 5 or so. Or, I mean, the 49ers at 12 is a pretty far way to slide back and still get your guy at quarterback. But if one of these other teams want to come up, it's not crazy to say that Lance could be the second guy off the board.
So who are we thinking that has at least quarterback in their vision in this draft? Do we think that the Dolphins, if they stay at number 3, would they leap and take another quarterback and put Tua to the bench? Because I just don't see them doing it.
No, I agree. I don't see them doing it. I see the Dolphins either taking Chase or another receiving option, whoever is number 1 on their board, possibly Chase. and either pairing Tua with a number one wide receiver. But honestly, I think the Dolphins could trade back. I mean, with what they've done in the past, like just hoarding all these draft picks, they already have another first rounder, wanting to build up the entirety of this roster a little bit more. I think that they either probably go wide receiver, but if I'm going to peg them right now for what I think they do, is trade back possibly in the draft.
So quarterback potential to Jacksonville, the Jets, the Falcons, not the Bengals. Are the Eagles still in contention for this?
I've seen it mentioned, and I'm not going to say that it's definitively off the table. I think some of that when they get to 6 or how aggressive the Eagles want to be. I know that the Eagles have brought on somebody close to Jalen Hurts on their staff, and I don't know if they're necessarily like have the roster that they're a quarterback away. Now, I know quarterback's the hardest question to solve in the NFL draft, but I don't necessarily see them taking a quarterback here. I'm not going to write it off, but would I be putting money behind it? Not necessarily.
It would be bad news for all those people out there who are currently betting the Jalen Hurts NFL MVP futures right now. I mean, a few people got them at 125-1, which I actually do think are pretty good odds if he's the starter. He has the prototypical game that you would look for statistically to be an awesome fantasy player, and sometimes having the best fantasy year coupled with like a 12-4 record can be enough to get the MVP away from probably the best overall player, because that's just how it works in a single season. But if let's say we take Philly off the board, the Lions, I think that they're definitely in play. I've heard other people be like, well, Jared Goff's there, they're just going to ride it out with him. Like, why would they do that? It doesn't seem like Jared Goff is the future anywhere.
No, I don't think that they're definitively tied. As much as Jared Goff wants to believe that, I get he's got to say that out in the media, but I don't think they're tied to Goff longer than the contract is going to dictate. I think that especially if they look at themselves as a team that, considering the moves they can make in this draft class, maybe possibly even what happens in this upcoming NFL season, could they be picking this high in the top 10 yet again? Now, I think it's possible, but I'm not going to rule them out from taking a quarterback. And depending on especially like who is there, I think they're another sneaky team that can move up.
Yeah, and this is their third straight year with a top 10 pick, so maybe they end up with another one. Who knows? The Panthers keep getting into this like weird Deshaun Watson discussion where, hey, we'll give you all of this stuff plus Teddy Bridgewater. It seems like despite signing him to a 3-year deal for a pretty decent amount of money and him playing all right, they want to move on from Teddy Bridgewater. Would you envision Carolina potentially going quarterback?
I think Carolina is a heavy favorite to go quarterback. Actually, that's my number one spot. We just talked about this on Fade the Chalk. I love Justin Fields, and I really, really hope he lands in Carolina. I think the fit for the system, the skill players around him, I think that they're definitely going to go quarterback. It just depends on who falls to them.
All right, so then after that, Broncos, yes, I would say they're probably in a quarterback market. Mm-hmm. The Cowboys and Giants, no. And then you have the 49ers and number 12. The Chargers at 13, no. And then you have Minnesota and the Patriots back-to-back. I'm not quite sure what Minnesota wants to do. I doubt they draft a quarterback and have him sit behind Cousins unless they can move Cousins. I actually like Cousins. I think that he's pretty good. But I just don't know whether Minnesota just looks at it and be like, oh, yeah, we're going to be good with Cousins this year. Or be like, we've done the Cousins experiment. He's a fine quarterback. He's not – we don't have the team around him at the moment to really go for it. If we can dump him off to a San Francisco or something like that, maybe that's a move, and then we'll take a quarterback. Because it does seem like the Patriots are definitely in the market.
I think the Patriots are definitely in the market. I don't put Minnesota there, especially after signing into the extension recently. I think they're probably going to ride, at least with Cousins, for another season. I think Minnesota's another trade back candidate, especially considering some of their defense underwhelmed last year. Needs that they could also plug some holes for cheap on the offensive line. I think they're a team that's probably more likely going to trade back or take whoever's at the top of their board, whether that's probably like a defensive player, at least at that spot of the draft.
So right now, per the odds at quarterback, like I said, Lawrence is minus 10,000 to go first. Let's just kind of throw that out. So the rest of the quarterbacks in terms of betting odds, where they're expected to go in order, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Kyle Trask. Who the hell is Kyle Trask? Where's he coming from?
I've seen his name thrown out there repeatedly. Coming out of Florida, I mean, he definitely flashed. If you look at his numbers on the page, he definitely put up some great stats this past season. Now, if you turn on the film and kind of watch some of his games, it's not as pretty as it looks on the stat page. I've heard some late first round rumors and possibilities for him. I won't be surprised if he goes in the second round. Kyle Trask looks more to me, both whether it's numbers or film. He looks more like the second coming of a Drew Lock that a team is going to take possibly in the second round. And after a year or two, be like, oh, man, what did we do with this pick and why did we make it?
All right. I'm just looking at pictures of Trey Lance. I didn't realize that, was it North Dakota State that he went to? Yeah, North Dakota State. They have the same jerseys as the Edmonton Eskimos in the CFL. So that's very interesting. Maybe the CFL could be in his future. Just he transitioned very easily. But how high do you think that he can end up going? Like, where do you think, like, prototype, where he fits the best of these, like, top 15 teams?
I think that he could go possibly as high if the most likely spot, I think, is number 4 to Atlanta, especially with Matt Ryan there. His contract is going to allow them to let Lance kind of sit for a year. If you're looking at this top 5 quarterback room, top 4, he's probably the most raw out of all of these guys. So I don't think that's a bad thing for him to necessarily sit. I know in the NFL these days, that's not usually happening very often. But I think that would be a great spot for him to go. And I think it's reasonable considering, especially with a new head coach, Matt Ryan is looking like he's got maybe 1, maybe 2 more years. Plus, you let Lance sit for that time. I think it's definitely a good spot for him.
I just don't understand why a team would do that at this point. Just we know how valuable having a quarterback on a rookie contract is for the rest of your roster construction. It feels to me maybe they sit him a year and then cut Matt Ryan, or if they draft a quarterback, they might just cut Matt Ryan, depending on what the dead cap situation would be. It doesn't really strike me as a smart idea to hold the two of them, because it's not like Matt Ryan is Aaron Rodgers in this way, where Aaron Rodgers wins MVP. You could not necessarily see it coming. Obviously, he had a huge bounce back season. He ends up as the MVP, but Aaron Rodgers is an all-timer. Matt Ryan has won an MVP. He's a very good quarterback, but do we ever expect him to have an MVP type season again? Like, I would say it's more of a stretch for him to have another top 10 quarterback season again.
No, and I think that's definitely a fair argument. I mean, I would not be extremely surprised. I mean, obviously, we've seen wild things happen in the NFL draft. I don't think that there's been a lot of rumors about Matt Ryan going elsewhere. I think the most likely thing, if they were to take a quarterback, would be to let Lance sit for the year and then take advantage, like you're talking about, Pat, of him being on the rookie deal. The other thing about it is, like, if Atlanta wanted to deal him, you're talking about his previous MVP caliber play. San Francisco wants to possibly upgrade the quarterback position. At least reading tea leaves, there's a maybe fit there. And I don't know if that necessarily happens, but we've seen a lot of like crazy trades go down during the NFL draft. So I would not be incredibly surprised if something like that happened.
I just think that Matt Ryan is better off on a team that's close right now. I think he can really help them. Like, Indianapolis would have been a really nice fit for him. Obviously, it was cheaper to go get Carson Wentz. San Francisco, like you mentioned, where you could, and he is an upgrade over Jimmy Garoppolo. He would be good on the Niners. I just don't see what he's doing on the Falcons right now. Like, maybe the Saints are in complete turmoil and maybe they're no good next year, but expect Tampa to be pretty good. Carolina, at least with their young defense, seems to be on the up and up. Maybe they could challenge for a playoff spot, but they just seem like one of those teams, like 6th or 7th seed at best, probably going to miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that considering what their defense down the stretch, I think people could have a little bit higher hopes than possibly the rest of the roster would tell you they need to be. I don't see Atlanta possibly being more than a 7, maybe 8-win team next year.
Yeah. So that's tough. Maybe they may listen. If everyone stays healthy, the defense continues to perform. You get a number 9 quarterback season out of Matt Ryan. Then all bets are off. They could go 12-4. I mean, shittier teams do better on a year-to-year basis. You just don't know which ones are going to be. But if you're going to plan long term, you bring in a new head coach to install a new system. From everything that we've seen, that you want to run some bootlegs, you want to run some play action, you want to have a bit more mobile of a quarterback, where Matt Ryan just seems like he's of this dying era of quarterback where you just can't do as much in that offense.
I agree. I mean, I think that the play action heavy system would definitely help him, because the last time that we saw him play at an extremely high level with Shanahan as the quarterback, that was integral to his success. Now, could that just prop him up and make him an above average NFL starter at this juncture of where he's at least skill wise? Probably. I don't see him reaching at least the heights. I just don't think that he has that in his range of outcomes anymore to be a guy that can really carry or help elevate a team to even 2 to 3 more wins in a season.
Well, let's talk high-end receivers right now. Obviously, the rookie crop from last year was excellent, but we're looking at Jamar Chase. We're looking at Devonta Smith. Who else do we have down here? Jalen Waddle. There we go. How high do you expect them to go? Because there's a case you could say maybe the Jets take one of these guys. Maybe the Dolphins do. But if those two don't, where do the receivers start coming off the board?
I think that Chase is definitely, I mean, he could possibly go inside that top 5. If Miami wants to pair him with Tua and give him a true number 1, I think that's definitely in play. I don't think that Chase or Devonta Smith, their floors are probably in the mid-teens. If Chase were to fall outside the top 5, I think that you're looking at the Giants are sitting at 11. I think that that's probably the floor for Chase, and that's probably in the higher range of outcomes for Devonta Smith. Like, I think that he probably ends up somewhere in the mid-teens.
Okay, that's really interesting. Right now, Chase is minus 155 to be the first receiver taken. Smith is plus 140, and Waddle is plus 700. Is there any other first-round wide receiver you think is in that mix besides those three? Like, are there guys that are going to go 19, 25? Because we saw last year the premium put on wide receiver, which probably means that people don't need a ton of receivers coming into this year. Or was last year's class just absolutely special in terms of talent? You had to go get these guys.
I think that last year's class was extremely good. Now, I'm not saying that this class is not as good. I think that this class it's a little more top-heavy to me, considering what we've seen out of Chase with Devonta Smith. If you want to put Waddle, I mean, considering what he was doing before he got injured for Alabama was fantastic. I think that he is definitively in play for top 10. Another guy that I think that has the overall skill set, the production acumen, we saw him break out at the age of 18. I won't be surprised if Rashad Bateman makes it into the back end of the first round. I've heard Kadarius Toney's name mentioned there. I don't think that he probably goes first round unless Kansas City wants to add some more speed and takes another luxury pick towards the end of the first round. But I do think Bateman is a really interesting name considering his skill set as a guy that could sneak into the 20s, especially if you're looking at a team like the Chicago Bears, which I think we all pretty much say, like, Allen Robinson, unless he's forced to stay there, is probably not going to be there for next season. So I think Bateman makes a lot of sense there.
For offensive linemen, Sewell seems to be the overwhelming favorite to be the first one off the board. He's a minus 1,000 right now. And it's just kind of striking looking at some people's work, looking at big boards, mock drafts, and obviously those are mainly going to be wrong. But you usually see like 3, 4, 5 offensive linemen inside the top 15. That doesn't seem to be the case this year. What's going on?
I think a lot of the skill positions, I think that considering where the talent lies in this draft class, I think the other thing about it is, at least from my early dive into this draft class, the offensive line talent and some of this trench talent looks like it's deeper. So I don't know if we were getting a case of where teams are like, well, I don't have to spend up with the equity, go first round, go even high, like we inside the top 40 picks to address some of these situations, and we could just wait and get our guy in the later part of the second round or even possibly the top of the third round, especially at offensive line.
Where do you think the first team would jump on that? I guess the Dolphins could jump on that 3 if they really wanted to. I guess the Bengals at 5 make the most sense.
The Bengals and the Dolphins are the two teams that stand out to me as well. I mean, I think that Miami, especially last season, if they don't go address a skill position or if they want to slide back a pick or two, like we're talking about them trading back, I think that offensive line is definitely a way they could go. I think Cincinnati is going to take an offensive lineman. It's just a question of who. If it's not going to be Sewell, then I think Slater is another guy that could creep up. When I looked at his odds, I actually like putting some money behind him as being possibly the first offensive lineman taken because of the limited tape that I've watched of Sewell and just comparing the two of them as a prospect. I think Slater has possibly the higher floor just looking at his skill set. Now, Sewell's definitely got the ceiling. I mean, the guy is a monster, and he's got about 15, 20 pounds on Slater. But we've seen teams before, Pat, just take like these ground rule double type swings or not necessarily going for the boom bust upside. And I'm not saying Sewell is that, But I think if you're looking at a higher floor prospect, I won't be surprised if Slater goes ahead of Sewell in the NFL draft.
Slater right now to be the first offensive lineman is plus 400. The issue with that, it's probably overvalued in the market because, as we know, a high percentage, especially of mainstream media journalists, went to Northwestern. And whenever you have any sort of Northwestern player, they tend to be talked about in a very glowing light, I've noticed.
I won't discount that. I'm not going to sit here and say that can't happen. I mean, look, Slater is definitely a great prospect. I have seen him above Sewell in certain mocks or different analysts that I've looked at some of their work, and it's kind of surprised me. I definitely will not discount that at all.
Kyle Pitts seems to be like the runaway favorite to be the first tight end off the board, but where are any of these teams going to feel comfortable taking a tight end? Like, I've seen some people say, oh, he's definitely a top 10 pick. Then I look at it, I was like, Carolina? Maybe? Like, I don't think that the Eagles are going to go for another tight end. Like, are you really going to spend that high of a draft pick on a tight end right now? Like, how good is this guy?
I think he's extremely good. I mean, whether you look at him as a tight end or even a wide receiver, because he did play a good bit outside. And looking at his skill set, he can win on the outside versus press or man corners. It's something we've seen him do, and he's one of the big reasons. If you want to put a reason as to why Kyle Trask's name is even being mentioned in the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft, Kyle Pitts is a huge, huge part of that. The guy's got an insane body control. He's a mismatch for size and speed, no matter whether you line him up inside or outside. Now, saying all of that, Pat, I don't see him going inside the top 10. I think the Panthers could make some sense, especially with Robbie Anderson basically having 1 year left on his deal. So and Curtis Samuel's out the door. Do they address possibly that secondary role behind DJ Moore in the years going forward? Yeah, I mean, that's possible. I think they need a quarterback more, but I think Pitts falling into the mid-teens makes a ton of sense. And I love, if he were to land with the Los Angeles Chargers and they don't re-sign Hunter Henry, I would love that fit for him.
I think that's entirely viable just based on looking at the team needs of what everyone has. Maybe the Giants move on from Ingram and end up going with Pitts and have Ingram's barely a tight end too. He's essentially a receiver. So if they move on from him, they take Pitts. Maybe they can upgrade at that spot a little bit. Obviously, like the Niners aren't going to draft another tight end. The Cowboys probably aren't in that market right at the moment either. Although Jarwin coming back from injury, I mean, they could upgrade, but they just spent another pick on CeeDee Lamb a year ago. Are they really going to go with a tight end at number 10 the following year? Probably not. The Broncos have Fant. The Panthers would be the one logical team because the Lions just spent the Hawkinson pick. And I think everything above that, like Eagles. I mean, the Eagles are a real wild card. I have no idea what they're going to do with their pick. I really don't.
No, and that's the one thing. I mean, depending on what you looked at and where they could go wide receiver, they could go one of these skill position players, they could go quarterback. I think that it makes a ton of sense for them to trade back. And I know I mentioned that for multiple teams, but you have a lot of these teams. The reason they're at the top is because they're not good. So they have multiple needs on their depth chart. So them moving back a few slots and reloading their entire depth chart, especially guys on rookie contracts, and as bad as the salary cap situation for the Eagles is right now, makes a ton of sense. But they're a wild card. I mean, what the Eagles do is going to be really interesting in that side, that top 10. What the Dolphins do is going to be extremely interesting as well.
I guess after that, if the Chargers decide that they want to protect Herbert and they go offensive lineman and don't go tight end, like can Pitts block at all?
His blocking, I mean, we've talked about this with Josh Palacci over at FTN. His blocking is definitely the weak point of his game. And it's honestly why he's getting a lot of hype, and for good reason, considering how good he is in the passing game. But I'm not going to rule it out that Pitts is a guy that just because of where he could get drafted in the NFL, and if he gets stuck in one of these NFL teams where we can't assume rational coaching, we can't assume these head coaches, because we've seen this insanity in numerous seasons. We can't assume that he's going to end up in a spot where they are going to maximize his skill set. And his weak link is blocking at this point. So he goes top 15, top 17 to a team, and they ask him to be an inline blocker and an inline tight end and block a ton. I've got my concerns, Pat. I definitely do, considering that is, if you're looking at holes in Kyle Pitts' game, he improved as a blocker in this past collegiate season, but it's still not pretty. It's still not great.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It all depends on the scheme that he goes to. Will he be asked to block or will he be asked to play wide receiver? I think there's a huge difference in that. So you have the Panthers, potentially the Giants, the Chargers. The Vikings don't seem like they're going to re-sign Kyle Rudolph for the 100th season in a row. I know Big Irv is a DFS darling, but it's not inconceivable that he could go to the Vikings. Probably not the Patriots, I'm guessing. And then you got like the Cardinals, they're there. And maybe if he's still there for the Dolphins at number 18, depending on what they do with the number 3 overall pick, I mean, they should probably go defense, but I mean, Gesicki just really isn't panning out. They have like 80 tight ends. Why don't you just get one good one?
Yeah, I think the Dolphins are definitely a sneaky spot. They could take him. Gesicki has got want to say 1 year left on his deal. So do they really want to pay up and pay him money as well? I actually do kind of like the Patriots a little bit because of his skill set, because we know Belichick is actually a smart coach. I think that him being used as a mismatch for looking for a spot that could utilize him correctly. Now, I know they got crazy and took 2 tight ends in the 3rd round last year. So not necessarily, at least on paper, where it looks like, but I mean, he's got some pluses. If he goes to the Patriots in the 1st round, Pat, like the Patriots can't draft wide receivers to save their life in the 1st round. So at least he's got the tight end designation to kind of save him in that respect.
I just feel like why build up parts for a team that are luxuries before you have a team to build around?
No, and I don't disagree with that. The only thing I'll say to push back on that is the Patriots really don't have any receiving talent. I mean, the dusty, ageless wonder of Julian Edelman, what does he look like for the next year? N'Keal Harry is a giant bust. Maybe they should move him to tight end. I mean, if they're looking at just overall weapons, Pitts makes some sense. I don't put it as probably one of the favorite spots for him to land. Like I said, like I love the Chargers in numerous different facets of how he would fit with that team and them not having to pay Hunter Henry. But the Patriots, I could see.
I just feel like the Patriots, either they're going to take a quarterback or they're going to do the prudent move and maybe go get the top corner, maybe go get a great D lineman, maybe get some O lineman, like build the essential parts of your team before you start adding luxuries to it.
Oh, yeah. For the 5-minute rant that I just had about the Patriots and Kyle Pitts, the most likely thing that they're probably going to do is just trade back and do a very Patriots-esque thing and take a linebacker or an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman and go completely not sexy pick with it. That's probably what they do, though.
What if Pitts ends up falling to 16 and the Cardinals are sitting there? Add him into that offense.
That would be absolutely amazing. I think that it'd be a fantastic fit, especially if you're looking at just overall skill, weapons, and what Kingsbury could do with this offense, because Christian Kirk had made more questions than he's had answers as far as the secondary weapon in that passing game. So I think that he can make a whole lot of sense, especially with what I still consider to be a good offensive head coach with Kingsbury there in Arizona.
Are we still in on Kingsbury? Because he has not shown he's been any good through 2 years.
I'm not really willing to pull the plug yet. I think that what he was given at the beginning of his tenure in Arizona, they slowly started to improve a little bit. The record's been coming around a little bit. I think that some of whether it's been the offensive line was absolutely atrocious and played really above its head in 2019. They took a little bit of a step back. I still think that Kingsbury could do some things in Arizona. Their defense took a decent step forward last year. If that happens again and they get a little bit more consistency and a healthy Kyler Murray for the full season in 2021, I think they could take another step forward. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about Mac Jones? Because he is the name that I hear keep going up, been up, been up, been up, been up. Draft boards where it's like, oh, the Patriots are definitely going to take Mac Jones at number 15. And now it's like, there's no way that Mac Jones drops to number 15. It's like, what the hell is going on here? Is he the product of draft hype? Is he actually this good? Like, why does everyone want Mac Jones all of a sudden?
He's extremely good. He's extremely efficient. Now, the problem with going to the NFL and the way that the NFL and quarterbacks are succeeding and how we're seeing offenses be run with more RPOs, more mobile quarterbacks. I think that Mac Jones is getting a lot of hype. I don't necessarily know if he goes top 10. I think that it's possible, and I've heard Carolina as a name that's thrown out there. If Carolina goes and gets him inside the top 10, that's only because all the other 4 quarterbacks, teams went insanely aggressive, traded up, and got them all inside the top 5 or 6. So I think that if you look at it on paper, he's been extremely efficient. He's extremely accurate, but I don't know if I'm willing to buy into all of the hype and especially considering the direction that the NFL is telling us that they're going with mobile quarterbacks. I mean, it's still a tough pill for me to swallow to see him go top 10, though.
Is Mac Jones Jerry Jones's grandson, or is this just fake news on the internet?
Oh, that would be news to me. I haven't dove into him fully as a prospect. Like, we haven't covered him on the podcast yet. So if he is related to Jerry Jones, that would be some news for me as well.
I just thought it was a commonly asked question on Google. I can no longer find out. Cannot verify if that's true or not. I feel like I would have heard about this at that point because everyone would be like, oh, he's going to Dallas.
Especially, and then we would have heard all the 15,000 rumors about Dak Prescott and where he's going, at least at this point. So I'm going to go with you. I'm going to say that's probably fake news, at least at this point, but I could be wrong.
Tell me about the running backs that are coming out this year. Is there any one that you think ends up going in the first round? What are we looking at potential fantasy-wise for running backs? Because it does seem like the second, third round running back is, if you're an NFL team, where you want to be drafting them. And then when we look at some of the hit rates amongst who we want to take in fantasy, the best path, the opportunity on the field, that's really where they're coming from right now.
I think Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, talk about the running back position, are the first 2 names that are going to be coming out of anybody's mouth, and obviously mine in this spot. So I think that they are 2 of the guys that could possibly sneak into the back end of the first round. If Miami, with them having a extremely high first round pick and the other one later in the first round, could they take, and especially with them having some of their coaching staff at the Senior Bowl, Najee Harris being there, even though he didn't play there for interviews and stuff, I could see a fit there. But those are the 2 names considering production in college, their skill sets, because both of them are accomplished pass catchers. I think that they both could, or at least one of them could sneak into the end of the first round. I don't think both of them do, but I could see a team reaching and taking one of them at the end of the first round.
I just don't see who that team would be is the thing. The Saints are at 28. Obviously, they don't need a running back. The Packers, they can either re-sign Aaron Jones or go with one of the guys. They go with A.J. Dillon, who they drafted last year. They still have Jamal Williams. They're probably not going to go that route. They might even franchise Aaron Jones. Who knows? The only team I could see potentially doing it, because, I mean, the Browns have running backs. The Ravens have running backs. The Chiefs just drafted one last year in the first round. I guess the Bucs, but they seem sensible enough where they probably won't do it. And I hate to say it, but the Bills at number 30?
See, I've seen the Bills talked about as well. And I'm with you. I don't know if the Bills do that.
I don't think so either, but they would be the only team.
Yeah.
I mean, they just drafted Zach Moss. Singletary seems to be okay. I mean, their primary running back is Josh Allen. So they probably don't need to really upgrade in there. If they could run the ball a bit more effectively, but based on the way that they have, what are they, second in the league in pass over expectation, especially on downs, that they just want to pass. Maybe they don't need a running back, or maybe they need a better pass catching running back like you've talked about, and that is available to them. I just don't see them taking a running back at number 30.
I don't either. I don't see them taking a running back. I think that the Bills are looking at their running back room and saying, okay, we got to get somebody in here. I think that them going and signing a middle tier or either a cheaper running back, like somebody say like a Chris Carson that could be out on the free agency market. And I think that makes a lot more sense for Buffalo than taking and spending the first round draft equity. I think that them even moving up for a linebacker, like if they don't re-sign Matt Milano, them going linebacker and trying to move up and get somebody like a Parsons makes a lot more sense for their roster. But on the running back position, I mean, I really look staring at the top of the second round and some of those teams that are starting that run. The Jets are sitting right there. They make a ton of sense, as well as we're talking about, you have the Dolphins that are there at the top of the second round, as well as the Falcons. All of these teams, I won't be surprised, Pat, if no running back goes in the first round. If that is a prop somewhere where I could put some money behind, I definitely would, because I see that could happen here. And we just see this massive run at the beginning and throughout the second round of running backs.
I had that bet last year. No running backs in the first round. I also had Winfield first DB off the board, or first safety off the board. And I thought that Winfield was going to go to Kansas City at number 32. I was like, oh, double cash for me. Not how it turned out.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid apparently had other plans on phone calls. Next, at least if you're putting that money in that barrel again this year or something similar to that, I just hope that they don't call the quarterback and ask them who they want.
The one team I'm actually looking at, and you kind of mentioned them already, is that no one from 20 to 32 needs a running back per se, except for the Jets at 23. It seems like a quintessential Jets pick.
It definitely could be. I mean, they could be in the market. They could take Najee Harris at that spot. I think that looking at their offense, especially with a defensive-minded head coach and Robert Saleh, like, I would not be surprised if they were to go and select, like, if you're looking at fits, I think Travis Etienne fits for what they could do as far as running more, considering they have a little floor in the building now, running some more zone concepts in the run game. I think he would be a possibly better fit. So, yeah, I won't rule out the Jets possibly going ETN at the back end of that first round.
It does appear like if you're probably going to be able to get some really good defensive talent in the back end of the first round this year, because a lot of the teams that we talked about seem like they're desperate for offensive players.
Yeah, I mean, and you're looking at defensive talent. I mean, there are some high-end really, really good players that could fall towards the back end of the first round, possibly. I mean, in a lot of mock drafts, Caleb Farley's going really, really high. He's a really good physical corner, profiles as a possible number one shutdown guy. Patrick Surtain's in that same type of mold. I've talked about Parsons. I won't be surprised if he falls a little bit, although I think if he does, a team is going to possibly aggressively trade up and get him. But there's a lot of really good defensive talent and some difference makers, especially in the secondary.
Any back end second round or even lower than that, just prospects that you like in general that you think that they're being undervalued?
As far as undervalued, now I haven't gotten extremely deep into the weeds on this prospect class right now. I know Javonte Williams has gotten a lot of hype out on Twitter and stuff like that. I think that he has got the skill set and just the overall makeup to really explode at the NFL level, even though he shared a backfield in North Carolina with Michael Carter. So if a team takes him, like if he were to somehow fall into the mid or late second, I think that he could be a great value there for a team. And I know a second round running back doesn't sound like a smashing value, but considering his talent and just what I've seen on tape and statistically for him, I think that he's a guy that could surprise somebody, like maybe be the third running back to come off the board. And we're looking at this draft class in a year or two. He's the number one running back that people want, or they're talking about the most out of it. As far as wide receivers, I've seen a lot of love for Elijah Moore. Some other guys we scouted, at least over on Fade the Chalk. Considering fit, he makes a lot of sense. We've already talked about Bateman. I think that Bateman's got an overall skill set where he should be closer instead of back into the first round, top of the second, where people are talking about or he's being mocked to. I think his talent level and just his seamless transition to the NFL possibly, he deserves to be in that mid-teens or possibly the top 10 conversation at least. Like he's just that good.
All right. Derek Brown, you can check out his work over at ftnfantasy.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Debro_FFB. Tell everyone what you have planned over the course of the next 2 months or so.
Yeah, Pat, thanks for having me again, man. This was a blast. We are pumping out tons of prospect profiles over at FTN Fantasy and for Fade the Chalk. Throughout this week, I think by the end of the week, we'll be 10 to 12 players deep as far as podcast episodes. So follow us on iTunes, check us out there, as well as I'm writing up prospect profiles for FTN Fantasy, doing some other futures work. I've got my Super Bowl betting article and the NFL draft futures that should be live today or tomorrow. So lots of draft content.
Yeah, you need it. Go to ftnfantasy.com and ftnbets.com to go check that out. You want some? I mean, you can use the prop shop up at ftnbets.com as always, but on daily and on bets, code MAYO will get you a discount if you want some of that premium content. Tennis bets hitting at a very high rate right now. Just follow those and you make all the money back that you lose from watching me, and we're going to be good to go. Code MAYO over at ftnbets.com and ftndaily.com. Remember to smash the like on the way out. More football coming at you where we took a little bit of a hiatus. Now we're going to to be ramping back up. Jeff Radcliffe's big board is going to be live at ftnfantasy.com right now. We'll get Jeff on probably next week to continue talking about the draft prospects and how that relates to both gambling and fantasy going forward. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!